So welcome everyone to the Historic Area Commission Work Session. It is Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. I guess we should start by establishing the quorum, so we could all state our names. Sarah, who were to us?
Lisa Doak.
Michael Westman.
Cynthia Batty.
Wonderful. We have a quorum. So the purpose of this meeting is to just kind of look back at, it's been 8 years since the new guidelines were implemented. Obviously not all of us have been on the commission or even, lived in town since they were updated. But we just kind of want to look back and kind of look at the different processes. I know that we have all sort of noticed some issues. There have been some issues with, things like incomplete applications. So we've identified some problems. We're looking at solutions for those problems. And really helping people to understand that this commission is, it was created to protect and, essentially preserve the historic area, the historic district. This is an objective process. This is based on, best practices that are codified. So it's not subjective. This isn't based on what we personally want. And you do have limited resources. That's, unfortunately, it would be nice if we had unlimited funding, unlimited staff. We did request a certain amount of money for LG grant, the community certified local government grant. We qualify for that every year. That can be used to fund things like updating the guidelines, coming up with more supplemental guidelines, educational opportunities. So hopefully we get that. But right now we're just kind of looking at the resources that we have available to us and figuring out how we can improve things within the framework that we have to work in. So the first item we have here.
Actually, can I just add something to that? From things that we were talking about before, I think the Historic Area Commission is often seen as Dr. No by the city and by the people that have to come before it. But we came up with a really good way to think about it, which is that it's not a subjective process, it's an objective process. And so it's not individual people saying to other people, you can't do it because I don't like you, or I'm going to find a way to not do it, or I don't like the color you picked, or so we're going to say no. All of that stuff. I think it's how people, not everybody, okay, but there's some historical reputation of HAC, and that's not unique to this one either. They're all seen as Dr. No. So in crafting the things that we're doing, I think we should have an underlying theme and maybe even a motto of something along the lines of objective evaluation according to our legal guidelines or something like that. Don't have to say it quite like that, but you know what I'm saying? Because that way it's not seen as personal or unkind or our taste.
Upfront clarifier.
Yeah, exactly. So that is something that I will probably work into the stuff. If you like the work I've done, I'll do some of that. Maybe that could be worked into the website too. But because we had talked about this, I wanted to bring that idea up. I think it's really an important concept.
To the point, I think, with any historic district, I think some people tend to see the process that we have here as, you know, as unique to here, but this is really standard operating procedure, you know, within any.
Hundreds,
Yeah.
if not thousands
Yeah.
of districts.
So,
That's another good point too, Tara, is that there are hundreds or thousands of these around the
Yeah.
country. This is not unique, very important.
I was kind of interested to know that Aurora, Illinois, my home state, actually has a historic district.
Probably more than one.
With guidelines and everything, it's like, well.
Yeah, sign your life away guidelines.
That's
Yeah,
the
we're
way it is.
discussing that.
You know, when we bought our house in Baltimore, we had to sign something not unconstitutional into that.
so Cynthia and I have both worked on a few different items to review, a few different documents to review. One of the things we've discussed is on the, you know, the Historic Area Commission page that's on the city website, how to make that a little bit more user-friendly. I think when you initially look at it, it's a little bit wordy right now. And it's not bad the way it's presented, just reorganizing things. If you look at this page, the Historic Area Commission page edits, I think, you know, maybe having something like a purpose. What is the purpose of the Historic Area Commission? I've sort of summarized something there. Information, when meetings are held, where they're held, what time. And then just immediately giving some information about applications, you know, when applications need to be submitted. I do need to clarify that, you know, the timeline that I have in here for applications is correct. So I need to verify that. You know, guiding people to the guidelines and standards, so that they can review them. I think that's something that we're seeing is, you know, people will come to us individually as commissioners, or they'll call or they'll write Layla and basically say, well, I want to do this. What do I need to do? And that's not really, of course, we want to help people. We are here as a resource, but also it's not a good use of the time of the resources that we have. And so if we can guide people to the documents, to the guidelines, the things that already exist, it's much easier to answer specific questions than sort of recite things back at someone, you know. I also, I don't have the table filled in that I created, but I also thought it would be helpful to have, you know, a list of, you know, the members of the
Our names
commission.
right on the website.
Our names, you know, when we were appointed, if, you know, we're reappointed and when our term expires. I just think that's a nice snapshot.
And that's true of all the other historic area websites I looked at. They have the names of everybody
They
who
do.
was serving.
Yeah, some of them have, you know, addresses and phone numbers. I
Yeah.
don't think that's necessary for us to
No.
have, but I think this is just a nice.
I do want to say to everybody here, we both completed our materials several days ago and we're very disappointed that you only got them today. So, we realize you can't have read them, which is extremely disappointing and may point to a need to talk it through now, go home and read them and meet again in a couple of weeks, but that's okay. 'Cause I haven't had time to review this thing.
No, I mean, I worked today, so when I got out of work, I saw that, oh, look, we have a packet.
And some of these materials, I will say, you were able to get your materials in before I did, so I will take responsibility for some of
It's
that
your
because I
fault.
didn't.
The other thing was I asked for them to be distributed as Word documents, because I think as you're reading them as a Word doc,
Be able to
you can
edit.
track changes on them, and then we could combine our documents and see where we are. It's a be more efficient use of our time.
Is that something that's allowed because the submissions for a meeting have to be finite and not editable at that time?
I don't believe so.
That's not a.
I don't believe that, that just is having them sent out as PDFs is a recent phenomenon.
Yeah.
Okay,
it renders the documents very difficult to use. I
Yeah,
have to
because
say.
if you don't have the paid version of Adobe, there's not a whole lot you can do with the documents. I can't
Yeah.
extract.
And I can
anything.
certainly see applications and things like that you don't have Word documents. But
These are working
working
documents.
documents,
Yeah.
you should be
Yeah.
able to test them.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do is, as we talk through all this, we can say, we'll have this conversation now and then we'll distribute them as Word docs. Cause like the stuff for the website, it's a lot easier. I'm a writer thinker, you know, I wanna look at it and fiddle and twiddle and,
Mhm.
you know. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's certainly how I work. I'm not very good at reading it here and then saying, I think you should say.
Right, exactly. No, exactly. I know.
You know, but just glancing over this now, I mean, does anyone have any thoughts on, you know, anything that might be missing or?
I love
Just
the
on this
FAQs.
first section, this first
Mhm.
section.
You know what, having dates, a table with the dates of the meeting for the next 12 months might be good also.
Yeah, you know, that
Yeah.
is a really good idea.
And maybe do it as a table, showing the date. You know, the
When
15 days
materials are
before, is it
needed,
15
yeah.
working days, is it 15 calendar
Applications
days?
due.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, even though it's clear, you know, the second Thursday of the month,
Oh,
having
God.
the application deadline.
Anybody here tried to figure out when you're getting street sweeping based on the information we've been provided? It's suicide inducing. Unless I texted you and said, move your car, which I
I don't
didn't.
give it a
do.
second
Okay.
thought.
You'll get a $50 fine soon
Oh,
if you
lovely.
don't, yeah,
Um,
so.
no, that's a great idea.
But applications due this day,
Yeah.
meaning this day.
Yeah,
And you know, again, it's not, we have been, we do want to work with people. It's not about being, you know,
Extroverts, yeah.
exactly, but again, there's a process for reviewing these things, and it really complicates things if we don't have enough time, if we don't have all of the documents in the packet or all of the forms weren't filled in, and then, you know, people, you know, they come here and we have a list of things that they need to include that really should have been submitted before, and
mhm.
you know, there's only, Layla shouldn't be going through applications and making a list of things that are missing, you know,
I think I looked at the actual application itself last night. And there's a checklist below where they have to initial to say that they've read the statement, and it refers in passing to the checklist below. But then in asterisks on each supplemental page, it says, you know, for planning purposes or for planning use only. So the applicant isn't supposed to initial the checklist. It's for the
The
office
This is
staff,
reviewed it.
but the applicant really is the one who should be initialing it as they follow is, did I have this? If I'm doing windows, do I have this? And then there
Right.
was one column for the applicant initial, the second column for the
Yeah.
office staff
Exactly.
initial.
Yeah,
And then the
Right.
third one as, you know,
Approved,
Layla,
just
the
approved,
reviewing official, should be initialing, because I know when I fill out an application, I don't read the office use section. I just don't, like my mind, I'm like,
Blanks
that's
it
not
out.
for me.
Yeah.
right.
Do not write below this line.
We talked about putting a cover sheet on with the
Right,
checklist,
exact,
but I
something
think
like
the
that.
dual checklist there is better, and then redesigning the form, which is very difficult to use.
Right, so like we could extract all of that and basically make a cover
We
letter.
could also make that form into an editable PDF document.
That'd be lovely. I've seen that on
Yeah,
other.
there's no reason why we
Type
can't
it
do
in.
that,
Right.
yeah.
I would also say that, you know, in the meantime, again, working with what we
Yeah.
have available to us now, you know, guiding people to, you know, each section of the guidelines and standards is sort of meant to stand alone, or not sort of, it is meant to stand alone. And we do have a list of supporting documentation at the back of every section.
Right.
And so that's also a good resource for people to, you know, just, everyone should be looking at it, but,
They're not gonna, just warn you.
Yeah,
You want them to, but
Maybe
they're not
it's-
so
gonna.
I think it's also just about, you know, we are explicitly letting people know that it is there.
It is here.
And
Right.
I mean, because it's, again, it's, there is personal, you know, we're setting expectations here as well, and there is personal accountability in this, you know, you're filling out an application when you apply for a driver's license or a passport or anything, you know, you have to have a complete application, and you know, sometimes those, I would like to think that we're a lot friendlier than, you know, some of the individuals that you encounter in those processes, so, you know, just a friendly reminder to everyone that this is available. And then if you still have questions, of course, reach out
Yeah.
and, you know, and ask.
So I'm already editing, so I would say purpose and mission at the top. It's a chance for us to have a easy to understand mission statement. And in that, we should put the words objectively somehow, and then also with a pledge to be expeditious and complete. So this is not a come back for 6 months thing. If we can do it, we wanna help people do their projects.
Absolutely.
So some.
I think I read in one of these other historic areas that there was basically a minimum of 4-week processing
Mhm.
for a certificate of appropriateness from Sudbury,
Yeah,
for instance.
and we could be quicker than that in
Sure.
theory, once we agreed, but, and all these are serving suggestions. No two cities do it the same, we found as we were looking at them. The other thing is, applications and consultations. I think we need to put that on
Oh,
there, but,
sure, yeah.
but I'm making notes, so I'll edit that when I get the document. And I might be able to make the application form a PDF that's editable. Mark has the software, he has a license, which he's not using, so I can take his license over. And, but it's such a pain to have to handwrite that damn thing.
Yeah. Is that something that has to be approved by someone, or can we just rearrange
Same
the
text.
applicable, what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I
is
think there is a process. I mean, we're just
So we would-
discussing things
Right, so we could make one up and submit it to whomever would make the decision and say this, we think this
We can
makes
make
the application process
recommendations.
clearer.
Easier, yeah. And if that were true, we might take off the, for office use only check here things. If we're gonna put a cover sheet on that's a checklist where everybody's
It could be
agreeing.
as simple as maybe just you know, maybe changing the wording on the existing application.
Yeah.
And a few other things.
Our application is, I would say, 4 times longer than most of the other ones I looked at. So I would also question, some of them were treated very checklisty, like, you know, the windows are made of wood, vinyl, blah, blah, blah. I'm just making it up. Or,
Yeah,
you know, the outside is gonna be,
I think the
wood,
clearer
picked up,
and
or-
easier it can be made.
Yeah,
Is better than.
I do wanna just say, once Leila is here, she can provide some clarification, but the application was updated a couple years ago, I think in 2021. And so it would be nice to just have her insight as to
absolutely.
why, you know, the changes they made and why they were made.
Mhm.
Because I think there's also a piece of this, there's a piece that we're missing in that, you know.
Yeah,
that
is it really
information
helping
is-
her? I found most of the time, and I've filled out many of them, they're pretty opaque. And the other thing I always say about forms, I've designed many forms in my life. Whoever designed forms should be sentenced to have to use them for the rest of their life. So it does help you get to a lot briefer,
Mhm.
more to the point. So yeah, by all means, we'll hear what she has to say, but you know, I have the technical skills to do that if that's a direction we want to go in. Any other comments on this thing? For now?
I think, oh, sorry.
I think another meeting is probably good. 'Cause
Yeah.
this, I mean, this is just.
It's too much to take in.
Yeah,
Yeah, agree.
But yes, this is as an initial page of information.
FAQ's awesome, impossible to take in sitting here. So I
Yeah.
also
Yes.
wanna work on it, think of my own questions.
I would, I based what's here off of, questions that I frequently get. I will note that the last, at number 14, about.
I
owning
already started
sidewalk in front
arguing
of my
with you.
house, Yeah.
Right,
I started this document as a Google Doc and then
Okay.
downloaded it as a Word doc, and then before I sent it in, I edited the
right.
document in the wrong one, so there's
Okay.
why I have two documents, it's not the best, shouldn't be editing them.
I tell you what, I wish I didn't know the sidewalk to my house, I'm just saying.
But I do think that, there are many other, FAQs are available on a lot of other websites that I've seen. Again, this is not, it's not to supersede anything that is in guidelines and standards, but it's, I think having keeping track of what people are asking and, providing.
And updating it from
You
time
know,
to time.
updating it and providing an answer, maybe it's not a complete answer, but at least giving them an idea.
Alright.
But if you all have anything, any questions that you'd like to see on here, or you'd like to add,
I'm thinking some of these are a little long
yeah.
and could probably be broken out into individual
Yeah.
questions so that there aren't quite as many paragraphs to them.
Mhm.
Like, how many people sit on the council? That would be a separate question.
You guys should be grateful, but some of them have 10, 12 people on them, 15 people. At least we're manageable size.
Yeah.
That's a really good point about making more questions. The other thing we could do is put the questions in categories. So
Mhm.
application questions or
Sure,
materials questions or.
sure, I think that's a great
whatever.
idea.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and that's, again, these are just first drafts.
It's great, it's a great start, really good. Oh, do you want to talk about rebranding
She is.
Historic Area Commission? Hey.
I just had the thought that, HAC, as we, as people lovingly, affectionately refer to themselves. I'm over there.
Yeah. Layla, why don't you sit there so we can see each other?
Oh, that sounds
Hand this over so she knows who she is.
Yeah. See, so previous meeting too, I was like, I sat there and I was like, that should be Cynthia, but yours wasn't in front of mine. It was like, okay, we can make this.
How you doing?
But I think just, HAC, I think it sort of has almost a negative connotation to it, so, maybe HAC, it sounds a little.
We're
It's a
friendly.
little friendly.
Kinder, gentler.
Yeah.
Dr. No.
The
AKA
HAC, the
Dr.
HAC
Put it in
sounds-
small letters.
Yes, exactly.
At least it's not cat.
Yes. Not to put you on the spot, Layla, or, throw a bunch of.
We
things
hope
at
you read
so
all this
just-
stuff that you read.
I glanced through it. I wish I had learned that whole, I consider I read too fast when I was doing, somebody said do the whole thing, reading, which I guess that's what I was supposed to learn to go like. But I did actually glance through it and work my way through the whole thing. I think I had some little things that I was thought.
Well, you probably did better than we did.
And these, again, I mean, these are just,
Mhm.
these are first
Starting
drafts,
point.
but
Yeah.
one of the things we were discussing with the application, could you tell us, a little bit about, I think it was the application was sort of redesigned, what,
Mhm.
3 years ago?
Mhm.
And could you tell us a little bit more about, sort of the background of that?
Yeah, it's because what happened, they'd still been working with the old paper application for a while. And the idea, there was a concern that people weren't really understanding, people didn't have clarity. Could there be a way they could make things simpler? Could we make a form that they can fill in online? So this was one of the things that we managed to do. We got a CLG grant, which covers 60% of the costs. And they said, because we can get CLG grants for anything that supports the preservation efforts of a local community for their local historic district, which is why all those years ago, one of the things we did is we got recognized as a CLG.
Yeah.
And then when we looked at it, the idea is we had 2 work sessions. One of them, I kind of pulled sample application forms from about 10 or 12 different historic districts, historic review commissions, like there was Philly that kind of goes over yours, there's others. And then the idea is, how can we pull together the salient information? How can we make it user-friendly? How can we make it very clear? Another part of it was like, how can we have checkpoints so that somebody comes and can go and check? And so that's the first checkpoint. We're like, what are you doing? Then the idea was, then there's a checkpoint about where is it? What do you need to put in it? The description. And then at the end, that's why we had the 2, although it's dense, but this was like, let's summarize what the HAC guidelines say you need to have. And the
It is a
idea.
PDF form, but it's very hard to use as a user.
And so the front,
You know that
Yeah.
checkpoint is on.
it should be, because you have to sign in at the back. And one of the things that we did is when we did the agreement, so you can see that the front pages, the first 3 pages are kind of like large spacing, big font, so people can see. And at the end, the agreement, which is actually language that I had gone over with legal counsel. So as people would know what they were signing and saying that they knew, that they acknowledged that everything was complete and what it meant, and that they understood everything that had to do, and that they needed other approvals, potentially the building permit. So it was put there. And then on the other side, we had a checklist that they were supposed to sign off and say, okay, we've taken a look at this, we understand. And then the portion in gray, which was kind of, we stuffed a lot, but don't make a 20-page application. That's supposed to be a checklist for the city staff.
Okay.
So Marika can say, okay, it's roof, is it, a replacement, is it new? Do I have this? Does it not apply? And then the idea is that allows Marika kind of to check through. But we gave them like the double opportunity, the opportunity to sign off here, and then the opportunity to check off that they understood. And always, one of the things, because everybody said, the big challenge where people said, I didn't know, I submitted it. So that's why the big part where they check with the initial, it's like completeness, review, checklist, and acknowledgement. So when they put the initials, and that's why these are certain things where legal counsel said, and others also have that. It's like, we need to say that you've read it, that you've done it. And so
You
they say they've
committed
done
to
it
it.
2 or 3 places.
Yeah.
So that was the background. And so then there was a back and forth. There was a first draft, there was a second draft. It was kind of a mix of different strong points from different applications. Because some cities, like the city of Philadelphia, literally has a routing sheet. Like when you go for a building permit, if you have a certain type, it'll say, okay, you need to get the PHC, the Historical Commission approval, you need to get the building permit, so you literally look at it, and then when you get to the building permit to get it, they check that you have everything, so you kind of have this is how I work my way, but that's not for the historic heritage, it's just for the building permit in general. You're working your way through, that was like that. And we saw some other HACs had like very simple, so like what we had, like, here, what are you doing? And like it. And the idea was also to try to kind of pull out certain things that were different, like awnings and canopies and foundations. Just so that we figured like they triple check at different locations, but that was the background. So that was, I do believe it was pre-pandemic, I think, or just at the
And
top of
it is an editable PDF.
It should be, that's how it's,
But once it's filled out, I don't think it's retained as editable, it becomes a piece of paper. I don't think it gets the checks put into it unless there's something happening that I don't know about.
I don't know, I know that when I
You
get
can
them.
password protect them if you need to.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying is in our actual workflow, I think it turns into a piece of paper and gets handled as paper.
I don't know, we seem to get, the applications I get seem to have double covers. They'll have a handwritten one, and then they'll have this one. In some cases, there's only one, but that's when somebody does a very detailed, you know, you can tell they filled it in and in details. But other times, people just seem to print them and then check mark them, as opposed to filling them online.
Cynthia, did you mean like they can't be submitted online? Is that more what you were?
Well, no, what I was saying is that after they've gone through a review, I don't think that they are retained as Acrobat documents. I think that they turn into paper documents.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. That's very useful. If you would like, as I said, I've done a lot of form design in my life. I can look at it and make some suggestions for maybe how to reorganize it a little bit. One of the things, Leila, we were talking about was putting a checklist on the front as opposed to on the back. So that people kind of get ready for all the stuff they have to provide and they can't lose it in the back, you know? Like I did, I forgot to put in the photograph of the as-is circumstances, so, I mean, I'm not sure, form design is not a team activity as a rule, but,
And I mean, if you want, this was actually all based on I actually started out. I had no design at the time, I probably done anything design when I first did it, but I actually started out in a Word file and then moved things around and generated. So I can send you, if that makes it easier, so you don't have
it's in
to.
the Word.
Yes, you
Oh,
don't have
that'd be
to
awesome. Yeah.
rewrite everything.
Okay.
And I think one of the things is to have to meet that combination, having the checklist, but making sure there's this information that pops when we're reviewing it.
Right.
And then always having them, because the checklist back here is actually a check for the city to go. It's a reminder, but it's time for the city to go through and say yes, 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 nay, you know, so they know that.
So I can't imagine they are based on the applications we're getting currently. They can't
Yeah.
possibly be doing that in the office.
No, I think normally what they would have been is they would have been checked off and then signed off in the back down here, you know, that's.
But
that was
that's,
kind of
and
the
that's a
idea.
procedure thing. It doesn't
That's a
seem to be
procedure
happening.
thing, yeah. The other thing is also, I mean, along the same lines, one can also, because like the guidelines, when we did the graphic design, it was actually purposely like a very simple aerated one, like if somebody's
Yes.
walking around and they're like, well, I wonder what my house is like, even the style section.
The guidelines are very good.
So that way
from a
they're
graphics
boxes so they can,
perspective.
but it also means that they're also designed in a way that if we want to pull out
Sections. Yeah.
sections, you can, and you can almost ultimately for each section, pull out the required documentation at the end, although I don't know if it's all formatted to start at the top of the page, I don't think it is. Because some of them were just tracking, so, I think that's.
I've come to appreciate that document much more in my old age, I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I think pretty much all of them actually track. When you look at the supporting documents, I think we tried to have them all start at the top of the page, that people would have notes, so that's also something that if you want to sort of make sure that everything, you could literally have a document that's just all the supporting documentations in one PDF. And they have the header, so somebody can just go through, and typically that supporting documentation also has references right under them. That's how they work, so that's also something that's, you know, thinking about distribution of information in a way that's simple to share and that can act as a standalone reminder. That can also be, and we all reference the various standards, so. Yeah, but I'll get you the Word file.
I can take a shot at it before our next meeting unless anyone else wants to play with it. I love the preservation incentives and resources section.
Yeah, it's
That's
very.
absolutely.
That's the thing, you know, that I thought even though we do have a resource page in the guidelines, that is very good. I think people are missing that.
Yeah,
And something, you know, in talking to people, the only real incentive or program they seem to know about is the Downtown Development District program, which of course we don't all qualify for. but there are so many, you know, tax incentives, there are grants, there are grants that are specific to, you know, churches and, like the National Fund for Sacred Places. There's also one that's specific to, you know, cemeteries and, you know,
Nice.
graveyards and, you know, those kind of,
Cemeteries have a really interesting program. We just worked on 2 master plans and like, you can go to such an incredible level of revenue.
so, I mean, there's certainly more that we could probably add here, but I thought I think this is, you know,
Really good
fairly
stuff.
comprehensive.
Really good stuff.
And also just there, I think there are probably maybe some more nonprofits, but, you know, in terms of resources,
Mhm.
even looking, you know, putting things in on a useful link. So the National Park Service actually has some really useful information, with their preservation briefs as to how to approach, you know, restoration of, windows and, you know, they break down the specific elements. They have things on historic masonry, you know, the National Trust for Historic Preservation has resources. The Window Preservation Alliance, is another really great resource. The Society of Architectural Historians, they have some really interesting papers that you can read. So
The one thing that's missing here for me in terms of resources is like the Delaware Historic Preservation Tax Credit people actually have a page with suppliers who do this stuff. And I think wherever we can give links to lists of suppliers, that would
Absolutely.
really help people.
So I don't know that that page is actually public. I think that's something that they keep, and I think it's not that they've necessarily endorsed these people, like it's
Yeah.
still up to the individual to vet, you know, the
Right.
person that's doing the work. So I'm sure there's a disclaimer, you know, on that
Yeah,
paper that
because-
she has.
Because you can get listed like, either as a company or as a consultant, you can get listed for an NCAIS code about like, I do historic preservation, or I do this kind of work.
Right.
So that's an option that can be done. But I think also, I think if I can remember correctly, it's more of like it's an on request kind of thing, because they don't want to be seen to
Yeah.
be
Supporting
managing
anybody.
or managing, you know, a resource or somebody say, well, why am I not? You know, that's discriminatory. How come I'm not? Plus, it means they have to.
All of this pussyfooting is
I
not
know.
good for humans.
Yeah.
No, but I, you know, there's a reason for it too.
All right.
I did write and ask for that document. but it
Okay,
was
good.
denied.
We'll steal it immediately.
Share that.
How soon can this get put up? This is great.
I'm not sure. Oh, I didn't put in a link for the Downtown Development District grant, but that is on the website. I mean, they could maybe put a link to the information that's on the website.
Are you thinking of putting this like as a PDF with active links onto the website, or are you working with the city to kind of put this as like a page that would have active links within the page? Which kind of be,
That's a
nice, I don't
good,
know.
that's a good
Yeah.
question.
Searchable then.
We haven't discussed any of that. So my thought is after this meeting is, you know, so if we can agree that this document looks, you know, complete.
Good
or,
enough for now. Yeah.
Good enough for now, I can, you know, talk to the city administrator and see how we.
Yeah.
You know, what the next step
I
is.
assume we don't have restrictions on how many pages we can have within the site.
You know, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because if we don't, then all of this should be
On its own
active stuff
page.
on
Yeah.
on the site,
Yeah.
its own pages, not
And-
PDF things.
Just an
Right.
observation,
Mhm.
just an observation. You put it to a site, someone has to be responsible to maintain the
We
site.
know that.
Mhm.
and update
Yeah.
it,
That's a constant kind of thing.
Yeah.
Always,
Yeah.
every month, someone has to be coming through it.
That's something that we're cognizant of is that we do have limited resources, you know, or there's, you know. they're the person behind, you know, all of this at every step, so.
I think one of the things that I'd probably suggest is just in the titles, because people are very direct, so I think incentive and resources, and maybe one is like, I don't know if you can use the term like financial incentives, and then the other one would be technical resources, because then that's all the Park Service, and then the city of Newcastle, that would have to be, you know, governmental entities or something like that, just so that people kind of know what they're going to look, because then like the National Trust, it's a nonprofit, but you can actually put it under a technical resource, definitely the Window Preservation Alliance.
Yeah.
So I think,
Again, that's that subcategorization thing that we were talking about, that would help. So you could have the main title at the top and then break it down by category.
I would just caution, the one that, when I was looking at it, the one thing that I would caution is the link to the Historic New England, because that's kind of, it's not a national, it's another group, and if they
Right.
change anything like that, that's something where maybe you don't need to put something back specific. I think all the
Okay.
others cover a lot of things.
Okay, I mean, that can be removed.
Yeah, because I think all the others, everything's national park, national trust, national organizations like, you know, historical, Winter Preservation Alliance, Preservation Trade Networks, I have to double check if they have a state by state
You know, that's-
directory,
I forgot to.
because those are craftspeople.
Yeah.
So they might have the state by state member directory, which, you know, again, nobody's recommending them, but that's
It's
kind
just
of,
a resource.
yeah.
And I would venture to say, since it's a city website, we're gonna submit this information to someone. We're not gonna be permitted to actively maintain this
Yeah.
information. Anytime we make an edit, we're gonna have to submit the edit to the person that has back-end rights to the page, so.
Right.
And they will vet what they're.
Exactly.
We have a disclaimer someplace indicating this isn't the full and complete.
I mean, these are just first drafts,
No,
like,
no, but when
Yeah.
eventually it goes up, you don't want to be in a situation where someone says, I read your text, I read your requirements, I met it, and now you're telling me it's different. We need a disclaimer saying that there may be some variations and that there has to be some procedure for them to follow so they don't get caught in catch 22.
Oh, well, I
We're
mean-
just talking about resources right now.
oh, are you looking at the frequently
in
asked
general,
questions?
Whatever,
or-
no, whatever you post that's considered to be a description of their tasks needs to have a disclaimer someplace that it may not be entirely comprehensive.
Okay.
That's just a small thing.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're setting a trap for someone down the road.
Yeah, and I imagine, you know, with any of this, you know, the city solicitor can review these documents as well and give feedback if we
Yeah.
need any, you know, if anything is.
So I think
Necessary.
along comment, Kevin, one of the things is, one could just remove the percentages and the numbers, because then you still keep the description, you say
Right.
it can receive central cost rehabilitation, that means if it's updated, you know, it's always that thing updated in one
Right.
place. So they go to the link and they find out, because they may, depending on funding, they change from year to year.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it could be one of those, I mean, I don't. Again, I think if it's a city website, it's probably, if it's taking you outside of the city website, it's gonna have one of those disclaimers. If
Yeah.
You are leaving a city website, we cannot, you know,
yeah, I think it's more the verbiage here.
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean.
Just make it like a percent, you know, for an income tax
Right,
credit
that's
is
all it needs
available.
to say.
That's fine.
Yeah, the thing is that 20%, even if you just claim it and add, which may vary by year, will actually get people to go look.
That's true, yeah,
If
kind of,
it's,
Yeah.
if it's 3%, no one's gonna go look,
yeah.
you know? So I think making it seem worth their time
Mhm.
is worth doing.
Yeah, that, as long as, you know, as long as
You could put a
they're
hedge in.
comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, put a hedge language in.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at other sites, at other, you know.
And they put them, yeah,
City, yeah, and they had them available, but again, this is why we're this is what we're talking about it.
And we're and on some of these, we're kind of being like, okay, if I were the person who could be specific, that's a push, I would say X. I agree, seeing a number actually attracts people. If the city's comfortable with that, and anyhow,
Yes.
they know that they're always ultimately responsible.
Right.
You know, and maybe it would be for the latest information referred to, so that way
Mhm.
they go and they know that. Exactly.
Yeah, we could even have a, well, I don't know, let's say a date at the bottom of the page, like updated on, but then that if everything stays static, then it makes it look like our information's antiquated, when really it just means that nothing's changed, so that's probably not a great idea.
Yeah, I think putting the latest was like when we do technical specs and before, like if you're referring to building code, you refer to the edition that was adopted. If you're referring to ASHRAE or general codes, you say this code precisely retrofit between parentheses latest edition. That means they have to, if they're doing the work this year, they did the same project 3 years ago, they're supposed to go and double check. So if that has been updated, then it's on them to use the latest.
Right.
Nice. Nice work. So you wanna, me to do my stuff now? Okay, so, I think a big part of what we're gonna try to do here was look at how we were gonna communicate with people. And, I did a lot of research on that, and it became clear that there's not just one stakeholder group to communicate with. And what I came to was, homeowner, business, and real estate agent and law firm as one category. We may decide to split that, but that's a choice. The other thing that I realized late in the process is that it has to be renters as well as owners. And I'll cover this other part first. I think we need to think about it, and maybe take a little bit of advice, and then we can go through the actual documents themselves. Quite a few historic commissions around the country required people to sign documents to indicate that they understood that they were in an historic district. I actually think that's a really good idea.
I do too.
In large part because of the problems that we've seen come up most recently. And the other thing I would say is every time you look at something that one city has done, you think of something that's missing.
Of course.
And every city does it differently, and there's a lot of examples in here from other cities, and that doesn't mean that's a right way or a good way. Like Layla said, I looked at 10 or 12 different examples to get to the one that's right for us. And so what we do has to be right for us, whatever that might be. It raises some questions about if we were to do this, let's just talk about the process first, and we'll talk about what might happen from a legal perspective if we wanted to implement this. We would need a place where those signed things would go, because at some point when somebody was violating it, we would need to be able to say, but you said you knew. And that's would be part of an enforcement process. And I think, by the way, I think we're headed up to a very painful enforcement renewal period now in the city at large, based on everything that we're looking at. And that speaks to larger process, and Tara and I talked about it a little bit today. Like, where do any of these documents go? I don't know. And I think you're gonna work on that, Lisa, with the office, or that was what I heard anyway. Yeah, yay, not me. But it also may be that we can file them on a website database as well. If we use the database that the University of Delaware is developing for the Planning Commission, which we may be able to clone and use. That is somewhat by date, but it also has to be indexable by parcel. And I'm not sure that that's the vision right now for the Planning Commission database, but But by parcel, we need to be able to retrieve all of this information. So there's some administrative stuff that's got to get sorted out. But what I realized in looking through it is that many municipalities had codes, and the city of Newcastle has a municipal code. Which if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend that you do, since half of it is historic area. And very powerful support to us in our role here. But we would have to have that updated. So they would have to add a new section for supporting the historic area and requiring people buying or renting to sign a document that says that they understand. And so the document that I did here, and again, we haven't had a chance to really look at it, is summarizing what I think that would have to include and showing examples of actual language from Montgomery County, Maryland, and actual signature documents. One is from Maryland and one is, what was the other one? From Illinois, as you were saying. And I have full-size ones here so you can see them. You'll immediately think of things that you'd want to do differently when you look at them. But they're there as sort of proof of concept that this is happening all over the place. And I'm sure that these jurisdictions got to this place because of the same problems that we're facing now.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to have an in-depth conversation about this when you've had a chance to read it, of what I thought the code purposes were. I could read it out loud here. I don't think it's productive to do that. But if you read it and then you think about the experiences that you had here, what would you add? What would you change? And maybe add enforcement aspects or something along those lines. The other important thing, which I mentioned before, is that it's buyers and renters. Some of the most egregious downtown violations are renters, business renters, and they also need to sign up. And if they don't want to sign up, then they can go open their business in Newark and find out what they have to sign in Newark or wherever. Somebody raised a concern to me that this might be something that the state needed to weigh in on. Based on what I've seen, I don't think so, but Max will know because this is his business.
Yeah.
So we can just ask him. My sense is that each of the jurisdictions I looked at had their own set of rules. So and the principle of signing on property is as old as the hills. Every HOA has one of these. So, and there's no law that says you have to comply with state law to sign your homeowners agreement, homeowners association agreement. So that's what this is about. And I think we need to read it and think about it before we have a meaningful conversation about it. But I open the floor. Yeah.
We understand it'll be a 40-year turnover period before you have the bulk of the community signed up.
What do you mean?
Well, I have my house. I'm
We
not
might
gonna
make you
buy
come
it.
and do it. We might grandfather and say you have to sign it now.
Well, that might result in some blowback. We also want to keep popular support for HAC in the community.
I understand, but all of this is going to require a communication program of substantial proportions. Because these things that we've got here are going to have to be distributed to all homeowners in the 500 buildings that are homeowners, business owners, renters, whoever. They need to know because they're about to get enforced. For example, in straight up city code, you're not allowed to have a trash can out in front of your house. I took a walk around the city the other day. You can't believe how many people have their trash cans in front of their house in a historic district. You cannot do that. And I looked at all of them and there's places where they could put them behind their house, but they leave them out in front. It's not allowed. This is a precious, important place, and no, you can't do that. So we need to communicate that because then they're going to get notices of violation. And then if they don't fix it, they're going to get a fine. That's statutory now. So.
And I think that one of the things that has been communicated to, at least me and, I've heard it from other people, it's that, well, no one told us, or I didn't have this information available. I mean, this is the point of this is an effort of looking at what we have and identifying areas where we can communicate and make it, you know,
As friendly as
as friendly as
possible.
possible to the point where you can't deny that this information was not available to you. And that's, I mean, I think that's really helpful. I mean, I would much rather know upfront everything that I'm signing up for, because no one wants to get a fine.
Blindsided,
You know,
no.
or blindsided,
Well,
or,
it's the same as the enforcement right now for street sweeping. You don't get a fine right now of $56 for leaving your car out. But the communications that are going out now on social media are from the police. We're gonna give you some couple of warnings, but after the warnings, you're gonna get fined.
and who have communicated, hey, we're not looking forward to giving anyone.
No
a
one
fine.
wants
We don't
to
wanna
do that.
Just suggest that the Historic Area Commission exists because of the consent of the people in the town.
Mhm.
Actually,
We
that's
put
not
enough-
true. That is not true, sir. That is untrue. It is established in the municipal code
And the code
It's a law.
gets changed by how?
by the city council.
And the
they can-
city council gets changed by how?
But, people, of course, but,
There you go.
but I think you need to be very careful what you're saying.
No,
because-
I believe in the Historic Area Commission.
Mhm.
If you keep throwing salt in people's eyes, you're gonna have a
Well,
blowback.
here's the problem.
Ultimately resides with the consent of the people expressed through the representatives.
Let me ask
Let's
you a
be
question.
the good guys in town.
We're working here on being the good guys. You haven't even looked at the material I prepared, so
Nobody said mandatory for existing homeowners or else.
no, I didn't say or else.
No, that's why I concluded.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
Well, or you'll get a fine if you're in
Right,
violation.
if you're in violation,
which
you're
you're already.
which is
I
already.
mean,
It's
I
a-
live in,
it's-
if I move into Wilmington and I violate city code, I'm going to be fined for it. If I move into a neighborhood with an HOA and I don't bring my trash cans back by noon or 5 PM or whatever the rule is, I'm going to get fined. If I paint my front door pink, I'm gonna get fined.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
It's the way it works.
And I also
It's
wanna
the way
read,
it works until people push back.
well, I
Don't put them in
wanna,
a situation for pushing back. The reason a lot of ordinances are not enforced is because they don't want to have a massive resentment among the people in the town.
Understand and please call us out whenever you see anything like that about to happen. Okay?
I do wanna reiterate that this exercise that we're doing here, this is not the Historic Area Commission is not here because we are trying to be punitive. That's not the objective here. What we have, as we said at the beginning, this is an objective process. We are basing these things off of, guidelines that were established, that were adopted by council. This was,
And municipal
know,
code as well.
and municipal code, this was, when these were being created, this was an open process. It involved community feedback.
Well, I mean, some of the things that are, I mean, one is. It's good to let newcomers know, so process for that, which is kind of what we're talking about here. And I'll have some comments about the content, because it needs to be more generic.
Yeah.
It needs to go check, you need, anything you do, you have to come if you're doing X, Y, Z, as opposed to giving like, you can do this versus that. But to the point of people who already have home here, I know what happens, I'm in Newark. And I don't know what kind of bills people all get from the city. I don't know if it's, maybe it's not the city, but it's like water bills, or if you get a tax bill, I don't know, but like when the city, in the city of Newark, for example, we get electrical, Delmarva, we get the bill. When they wanna have a general communication, they do a prospectus, they put it in the envelope, and it comes with it. So you get your electrical bill and you get a note. So that's the kind of thing that if you wanna do sort of a mass distribution and there's this update, you can put a note like, so they call it a friendly reminder to everybody, and by the way, that's where you say the city website has been revamped and you can now find
So
resources about.
That exists already. It
Yeah.
comes in our electric bill.
Yeah,
Um,
so,
However, I've been here almost 9 years. I only actually realized that about 2 months ago.
Mhm.
I'm just making that point. So this is gonna be tell them and tell them you're gonna tell them and tell them you told them. It's gonna be a multi-part communication program. It's not something where we can just put it in the municipal utility bill and have everybody get it, so it should go in the weekly, should go
Oh,
in
yeah.
the Newcastle
It's the
City
communication campaign.
topics. Yeah,
But it's something that's just like. And perhaps that's mitigates, it's not saying, hey, you need to know you're signing off that you got it, it's more like. Somebody comes that I don't know, it's like, well, it wasn't the weekly, it wasn't your monthly bill, it wasn't this, it wasn't that.
and you even got a letter,
And it was
there's only
multi-
500
multi-pronged.
properties here in town, so send them a letter, right? And by the way, there's other stakeholder groups as well. I realized that entities who are renting properties in town here have to have a license for that. You may not have realized that. And so there's a pathway in to know who in this city has a license to rent stuff. In which case we can specifically reach out to them and say, we're trying to, get some communication out. And there are a lot of other, like if you want to do work in the city, if you're a contractor, you have to get a Newcastle City license. It's $50, but you have to get a license or you can get a big fine for working in the city without a license. There's another list of people to communicate with who are in the business of putting in the new windows or fixing the door or doing whatever it is that they would be doing. Of course, that is for greater Newcastle, not just the historic district. But there are many different ways to get to critical stakeholder groups who are going to be dealing with these problems on a daily basis. So it's not just a one-time thing. There's lots of ways, I think, Leila, and part of this exercise should be for us to identify all those points of communication. So, like I said, I developed 3 of them. I looked at a whole bunch. This may or may not be the right way to do it. I don't know. I recognize that, they're intended to be a brochure, but I realize that that's probably not going to work because they're going to be delivered as PDF documents, so this doesn't work. So I'll reconvert them into pages. But the way I wrote each of them is welcoming the person, entity to town. I took some language from all over the internet about the history of the town. This may not be right. Some of you who are more historically inclined could probably write it better than me. But I laid out that the preservation of this part of the town is part of our legal code and that we have standards and we encourage you to engage with this. I put in the links to the things, which didn't print very well on the bottom, but they're both the municipal code and to the historic area guidelines. And then, the town of Sudbury, which Tara found, doesn't give any information at all as to the potential scope and ramification of the things that you might have to think about. And so I was explicit. Just for instance, not all inclusive. Talking about the key concepts, some of this I took off of the HAC website. How did I do, Tara? The historic character of each individual structure cannot be altered. Repair rather than replacement. Design and materials have to be compatible. New construction has to be compatible with neighboring properties. The reason I put these particular points in is because these are the ones where people just ran into the wall over the last little while. And there may be other things we should put in. The other thing that I included, and I tempered it depending on who the stakeholder group was streetscape. Because people are just doing all kinds of things without any awareness that they can't do it. For example, all year round Christmas lights, not okay on homes. Brick sidewalks and granite curbs to be preserved. Street furniture, pots, benches, and so forth, compatible with the building, period. And then I made a reference that it was clearly explained in the design guidelines. This is one of the areas where there's the most code violation going on in the city right now. And that'll create emotions. People don't want to throw their plastic pots out. They want their 20 plastic pots filled with dead plants still in front of their house. It's not going to be
You're
okay.
using the eye of the beholder.
Actually, no, we have rules and laws, so we're gonna enforce those. New building design, has to be consistent. And various other things. So then I suggest, that for homeowners, that they could consider doing a consultation with HAC. And how to submit a review application, and then I put in a little bit of information, assuming that this goes to newer people, about the other entities in town that are doing things that would be relevant to you as a new resident. So on the business one, it's a little bit tuned to business. One of the things I don't know, I think it's somewhere in the rules, is how large business signage is allowed to be. I don't know.
Probably is somewhere, I can't imagine there will be somewhere.
Yeah. But you know,
We just say that it has to be the design, scale, and materials, because purposely people on the HAC committee didn't want it to get too in the weeds. And
Mhm.
also because the size can depend on context, but we do say it has to be in scale, it has to be in relationship.
I think
It
that's
can't
again-
conceal significant features.
Evaluating on a case by case basis,
Mhm.
because, you know, we do have such a large inventory of, you know, structures of different periods that
yeah,
fall within that.
Yeah, the one thing that we're specific is any signage has to be below
Mm-hmm.
the windows at the second floor, so you can't put like a big thing unless
Right.
it was historically there.
Yeah.
You can't put a banner on the roof saying, here I am.
a lot of businesses have become very upset about this when they realize it. We have some real problems right now, very unhappy business owners. For example, the business owners who put decals on their windows, there's 3 or 4 of them. That is typically not allowed, so.
And I
yeah.
think this is again, what we've been discussing is, you know, we are here. We are a resource, and wouldn't it? We want people to be aware of this before they spend money and
Right.
do something, you know. No one takes any pleasure in having to say
Undo
to-
some-
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely, not, and you know, dealing with current violations is a different question. They shouldn't be left forever, but there could be a program to address that, obviously. But, and maybe I didn't put all the right things in here, or I didn't read it right, or whatever, but you can see where I'm going with this, is to try to be explicit about the kind of things that people need to think about. And this is, again, business one is for businesses who either own their facility or rent it, either one.
Both should.
Yeah,
And-
largely they rent, sorry.
One thing that just also popped up, and I'll just say now because I'd also, and I know we're gonna edit this and do some comments, but I think the one thing that I'd also caution not to say that members of the commission are available for consultations, because in theory,
It says that on our website.
I know,
If
and.
that's not true, we need to change our
And
website.
that's something that needs to be discussed with legal, because like, for example, the architect, whomever it is, has an official role. The city says you want a consultation, and then there's a record.
Yeah.
You don't wanna open, and I know before some of the things were done prior, I think you don't wanna have somebody who comes and says, but I met with Lisa and she said X,
Yeah.
Y, Z, and you're saying, well, we were having, so I think just you wanna
Dangerous.
have, yes, you wanna have
Yeah.
clear lanes, and maybe one can say, you know, consultations are available, contact the city, you
Yeah.
know, or
Yeah.
it's the architect, but.
All I was doing was the website, I didn't know.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, even if it is on the website, I wouldn't recommend putting it, because it just puts a layer. of
Well, no, I
potential
agree,
conflict.
I didn't know that, so
Yeah.
thank you.
And we'll need to make a note of that when we're updating the website to revise
Yeah.
that language. And
Then
we can always
I can
refer people to the
request that.
guidelines and have a discussion
Yeah.
about the guidelines, but a full-fledged consultation would not be appropriate.
Yeah, the term
Yeah.
consultation is kind of, is one that can be
Yeah.
loaded should things become
That's fine.
inevitable.
Mhm.
And I hate to be putting that legalese hat, but that is part of what I wanna make sure that you're not
We
having any
want
unforeseen
to pay you
conditions.
twice as much and have you here twice as often, that's what we want.
And maybe also, I guess if we're talking about disclaimers, that this does not supersede anything that is in.
yeah.
You know, that is in the guidelines. This is just
Well, that sort of thing, like this
Sampling.
document is provided for information purposes only.
Right.
These, that's the kind of disclaimer that we were talking about.
Yeah. That's fine, that's good. It's-
But, this is absolutely one of the things that we've kind of started talking about. Things that we could actually have available that realtors would have to give to
Right,
the home purchaser. And they would have to explain up front, you're moving into a historic district.
exactly, and well,
So first off, they know they're buying a house.
that have rules
has
associated. with it.
rules associated
Yeah.
with it. And, then so in other words, a brochure would be perfect for it'd just be in your closing documents.
It should
along
be
with
in
the
there
thing that
before
you
closing.
It should-
Well, it has to be in there.
Yeah.
How many people have read their closing documents?
Well, not every page of the
How many people have read every page?
application, but
It's
if
on
you
every
have,
signature line.
yeah, well, no.
That's.
Never read hers.
I'm saying, I pretty
Again,
much
we
most.
should
I
be
read
here
mine, I have to
as a
say.
resource
Yeah.
to the people in the town. We should be opening wider doors of understanding and cooperation, not setting bars higher or making people jump through hoops. We're a resource to the town to help the town's people, not to seek them out and hunt them down.
Well, sadly, our real estate agents are not informing people accurately, and that is
And they
extremely
never, so
serious.
we need to find some mechanism that's simple, inexpensive, and foolproof.
Making
Because
them
the real
sign a
estate- Let me
document.
finish, please. Real estate agents are in the business of selling real estate. Okay, so they're gonna bury a document like this somewhere in the package.
We've seen two go by that both real estate agents could find themselves in court over. So
That
we want
doesn't
them to
help
be
the town To
protected.
keep taking people to court.
No,
Punishment doesn't help the town. It's expensive. It's divisive.
it's not the
It
town
creates
taking them to
problems.
court, it's the homeowners who had grounds for lawsuits. So we want to protect the real estate
I don't
agents
find-
from
Now,
that.
now,
We'll talk about it
speaking for
offline.
myself, I
We'll
don't
talk
find
about it offline.
happiness in taking people to court and writing checks to attorneys.
That's fine. If
Let's
you'd like
not
to talk about the
fester
details,
a
we can step
situation that
outside and do
leads
that
to
later. There are at least two in the last 6 months that involved $500,000 each that were extremely serious problems caused by real estate agents. I'm not sure why you're arguing with me.
No, I'm trying to clarify. I agree with the purpose
Mhm.
completely. Let's find a way that's inexpensive, simple, and foolproof.
Would you like to write these?
No,
I
I
can
don't
hand
want
them
to.
over to you.
No, it's a lot of work.
No, really?
But we have to keep in mind, the goal is to put something together that can be made to work.
Have you read the one that I
No,
wrote
I
for real
haven't.
estate agents in Winooski? Maybe you should read it and then you might see that it's friendly and however, it does say in here, and this is where we probably need to have a discussion with our council. It's your responsibility to accurately inform buyers of the city of Newcastle of the status of their property within the historic district. I believe that that is a responsibility of a real estate agent.
That's a fair statement. I don't disagree with that, but I'd like to suggest we might want to approach council and say that they have a statute, a regulation, a requirement that every home buyer visit the town clerk and read a summary of what's expected in the historic district and sign. Every prospective homeowner actually visit the town clerk. They have to do
I
that.
actually
and
just
sign it.
suggested that, I think, didn't I? Something kind of like that? I thought I put together a whole bunch of material suggesting that that was,
I'm not being critical of your work.
Well, I'm just
It's
telling you,
a
we
lot
did
of
it.
work,
We
but there-
did.
We have to keep certain goals in mind. One is simplicity.
Yeah.
That leads to compliance and agreement.
And I think we're all on the same page. I agree with
You
you.
know, if your
Nobody,
goals are identical.
yeah, nobody, absolutely, and nobody wants, again, I want to reiterate that this is not meant to be a punitive process. We're not looking to, we all have to comply with this as well,
yes,
the
we
five
did.
of us, we are subject to these same
Mhm.
guidelines and standards, and we're not above any of them. So, yeah, so I mean, we are also approaching this not only as members of this commission, but as,
People who live
people
here.
who live here.
Mhm.
But no, I agree with you. Nobody wants this to be, you know, a process that is seen as, you know, punitive. The goal of this is to make things
To inform people.
easier, to provide information, to educate and, you know, give people the information that they need up front to decide whether or not, you know, this is a place that they want to live. Do they,
They
do
can
they?
choose not to, once they understand the rules.
There's a trade-off. They need to understand the fair things they have to get.
Mhm, absolutely.
And I agree with you, I mean, there's gonna be current residents that are not happy when they get this letter. But the education of people who are new members of the community, it takes time and it'll be a trickle down effect. And then as for the current residents who have not been abiding by the rules of the historic area, if they fall within the historic area, then I mean, they've been getting away with a lot for a long time and it's
Mhm.
just now they have to. Now we're starting to pay attention and, you know. It's not gonna be easy and it will take a while, but at least if we educate the new people slowly but surely, the people coming in will understand what they're getting into. Not to say that they're not gonna still push the envelope because that's just what people do, but we can't say they weren't told.
Right,
And that is something that we hear so many times. It's like, well, I didn't know.
I didn't know,
You
yeah.
I didn't know. No one told me. Where is this available? Or why, you know, why didn't anyone tell me?
Yeah.
And so we're trying to address.
the website doesn't solve these problems, that's
No.
the problem. Cause it's all up there on the web, you
Yeah.
know. And saying to people you should have known is also not an answer, it's really not.
And at the end of the day, it's not helpful and it's not productive. You know,
But there's obviously a way to get information out earlier in the process. You know, when I bought my house in Baltimore, there was a homeowners association. And our realtor said to us, there is a very strong homeowners association in this neighborhood, and they have very strict guidelines for this, that, the other. And of course, Chris and I were like, fantastic, that's exactly what we're looking for. But I can also see it being something that would discourage someone who was not interested in maintaining a historic environment. But you know, that homeowners association, somebody put something up that wasn't supposed to be, and it was like
Everybody's different.
you know, an addition on the back of the house, they made them tear it off.
Yeah.
Because it was not approved and. But the realtor told us up front. You have to understand that you are moving into this neighborhood and it has
These rules.
strict guidelines.
You had a good realtor.
Yeah, exactly. I know that.
Well, we
And
know
I
all the
did.
realtors
Some
in
results
town.
vary.
Yeah, I can certainly believe that.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it's a little unfair, we actually know who all the realtors are who are selling properties here in town.
I don't think we will always know all
And-
the realtors. I know it.
We know who they are
Maybe.
today,
Yes.
and I've spoken to some of them, and they're open, they're receptive. Tell me what to say, tell me what to do. You
And I
know,
mean, Delaware is a state where you make disclosures when you sell a house. And so this should be conveyed to realtors who are going to sell a house in the historic district, that this has to be part of their disclosures. And if we decide to make something like some of these other cities have, that part be part of the disclosure packets. I mean, we all know when we're shopping that some residents fill it out more detailed than others, but I mean, if it's part of the disclosure packets, just like with anything else they're disclosing, then they really can't say, because if we're sending them this letter after they move in, well, they've already signed and, you know, there's not a whole lot they can do about it now.
well, no, and then they end up having spent $300,000 on a house and can't do the improvements that they wanted to do. We had one come before us a couple of months ago.
But there's
Turned
also the
down.
basic realities, most people, when they move into a new city, they go to the city website because, oh, I need to, you know, what I need to do before, what kind of paperwork do I need to do? And the city website has historic area commission. And it's, I mean, we're doing this because we're trying to be productive, we're trying to be supportive, we're trying to share the information. And we're also trying to mitigate a situation, somebody comes and says, I've sold houses here for 20 years, I didn't know to tell them. So now it's like, it's here, it's there, it's here, it's in the disclosure, so I
The
think that's.
incident that I just
a good place
mentioned
to have
to
it.
you is a house that was in the historic district and the realtor told the buyer it was not in the historic district. That's where we run into
They could have
problems.
turned, well, then in that case, they literally have a case to turn because it's misrepresentation of the.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we want to avoid that going forward. And, you know, one of the things I've emphasized in here is that there's a database. You can go look up by street address, whether you're in the historic district or not.
I think that's where we need to be precise, and again, that'll be the wordsmithing, so it's not for this form, but it's not there in the historic district. It's there either in the local historic districts or eligible for list, I mean, those are terms that have to be precise, because
Okay,
somebody can say, oh, you told me it's not historic district, well, yes, it's not, it's not the local district, it's not the local commercial district, you know, because of that. When we brought in the guidelines, that was one thing that was purposely done, that now it was any property that's in the local commercial district, local residential district, or the limits of the National Historic Landmark District. Or eligible, because there are a couple of properties that are out there, they're not in the, I know it's a lot of verbiage, but at least
no,
it's
it's
precise.
important to be precise.
So I'm wondering if we could actually have something on the website with a question that says, is my house in the historic district?
That's
Put
a
that, I
database
put that in
on
the
there,
FAQ, it's not complete, but I did.
But if we could, if you could
put
just
that
have a
there.
thing where enter your house and enter your
Well,
address.
there's a link like that, for example, the link that goes to Chris, you know, the cultural resource where they have the GIS map. That would work for anything that's in the National Historic Landmark, because you put in the address and it pops up.
Mhm.
It doesn't overlap the
Or
limits of the
districts.
local districts.
Yeah.
So then there was the list that we made for the National Historic Landmark District, but I think that's kind of, and I believe that at one point Jeff had been working with an intern where they kind of did like a whole GIS map where it could pop up. I don't know if it's easily, you know.
So the historic buildings database is not comprehensive.
It does cover pretty much most, because I mean, they do overlap the local historic, it's just the National Historic Landmark is actually bigger. There's just one small area, I think, where it has to do with the battery, but it's actually bigger in size. So it kind of covers that way. But I think, so that's why that listing was put in as trying to be pretty, you know,
So
comprehensive.
maybe that's something we can examine, you know, we can look at that a little closer and make sure that we, you know,
Get the
link as
exact
many resources as we can
right.
to make sure,
Yeah.
because there's also been people, you know, who will say like, oh, well, my house, they're within the boundaries of that district, or they are considered, they are in the purview of the Historic Area Commission. And, you know, people will say, well, my house isn't historic because it was built in 1900. Well, it is historic. It is it's a contributing building.
Right.
And, or something we hear too is, well, it's a new build, or we have people come before us who are building new homes, and it's like, well, I don't understand what this has to do with me. This is a new building, it's new
Right.
construction, but you're building in the historic district. And so, you know, it's,
So in the database that's on the HAC
Mhm.
website, that list of properties that are all contributing, what is that called? What's the name of that thing?
the historic buildings database.
Yeah,
That's what it's called.
no, but I mean, is that the National Historic
Yeah, that
Landmark or is that the
came-
historic district? or what
That
is it?
came from an updated survey, 2017, 2018, of every single building that was on the National Historic Landmark, so 548 buildings. And the
Okay.
idea was to determine whether they were still contributing. A couple of them bumped off the list of contributing because they've been changed or there've been some demolitions, some of them weren't here anymore.
Mhm.
2 actually went back onto contributing because we're like, Jeff and I walked together, we're like, these really look pretty good. We don't understand why it would be deemed non-contributing, so it was deemed
Okay.
to be contributing. It's an updated reconnaissance survey. So it dealt with those. And
Because that may explain why there's 3 different maps of the historic area on our website. Which I found out when I was trying to help these people who found out after they bought their property that it was in the National Historic Landmark District.
yeah,
And so we need to make sure we've got that language completely clarified so that people know what they're looking at. And it needs to be consistent across the HAC website, and I don't think it is right now. So we really need to focus in on the language. So anyway, y'all can read them. I guess tomorrow we'll have Marika send them out as Word documents. So that you can edit them yourself. I mean,
Yeah, we can track changes, because I mean, I don't know what level everybody's comfortable having a shared Google Teams or Google Teams doc. That might get a little bit
I don't,
onerous.
no, if
We
we,
can do
if we
individual
had
tracking.
Teams, if we actually had Teams, I would be fine with that, but we don't. Google Docs I don't trust, so, in part because it's not really confidential either.
Yeah, plus it gets, I mean, everybody can just send, we could track changes and then decide at one point who's gonna do a concerted
Yeah.
review and keep or not.
What I will do before we resend them as Word docs is I will turn these into single page documents. It'll just be a little easier to deal with.
And the other, the discussion about new builds is, should there even be a third letter to people who
New
build a plot
construction.
of land, or buy a plot of a vacant lot in the historic district? Not
Why
that there's
not?
gonna be that many left anymore.
But again, that would be a place where we could say to
Yeah.
them, you're in a context, you're not building your brick palace right in the middle of all the, worker housing. It's gonna have to be consistent with what else is going on in the area, so,
There is infill.
yeah, that, and having them as separate documents, they could also be, and this is something that Margot Rain brought to me as a special project. She wanted me to write one of these, like Wilmington has. And I said, well, I already did that. We're reviewing tonight. But this is it all in one document, and it contains maps also. So we could have it two ways. We could have one complete set of documents, and then we could have them separate for different purposes.
And really, all the information that is in that document it's information we already have in the guidelines and standards, so it would really just be putting it in a different format. Kind of as you said,
Yeah.
repackaging.
Yeah.
things that are available.
I think making sure that anything we say in the handout documents is absolutely consistent with what we have in our municipal code and the design guidelines is going to be extremely important. And it will be easy for those things to get separated if we're not careful. So, so one thought is that maybe that these end up incorporated into the guidelines book itself. in some
Dependencies.
fashion. Yeah. So that when the next hapless group comes along and edits it, or updates it, they'll know what they have to do.
I always think when people come, I always thought this for me was kind of really the most, is when you just look at that. And that's simple, like you're in Newcastle, and this is pretty much the breakdown of the ages. This was all the buildings in Newcastle,
That's interesting.
which is quite literally like, particularly see that, like you can clearly see
Yeah.
that chances are, unless you're in the less than 5%, or, that are post 1930s, everything else is pretty much historic.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was also interesting because a lot of people always like, oh, it's colonials, like, but there's all that workman's housing in the 19th century. That
Right.
actually-
Well, there's Victorian buildings in our downtown
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
One of the things I was looking at with Margot is that one of the Victorian buildings has Victorian furniture out front. So that's period appropriate.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's so much more than just the colonial, because and some of that Victorian is really a lot of fun. And the craftsman also, that's also interesting.
so let me work on this and we'll redistribute tomorrow, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you for listening and all your very useful comments.
Thank you for your hard work. It is a lot.
Thank you.
The only, I did want to say, we do have concealment methods for gas risers on the agenda, and that's not really something, I just want to give a brief update on that. Both Cynthia and I have been looking at concealment methods that other historic areas have been using. What we saw happen in Newcastle, surprisingly, is not it is not unique. Many
Of
other
course not.
places have faced these. So it's just, and I know, Lily, you also have examined this as well, so not, not that we're trying to reinvent the wheel
Oh,
here,
no.
but it is something, again, it falls within the purview of this commission, and I do think that the concealment method, again, because whatever, we propose now, that they will need to be replaced, or it should be, consistent, just like everything else we do, there should be, maybe be a, maybe a standards for, different buildings and, architectural styles and.
Just a little update from my side. I worked for Constellation Energy for a year as a consultant, and I knew very senior people. Constellation was bought by Exelon, who's our service provider now. And so I wrote to my friend at Exelon, not having followed the news that Exelon had then divested Constellation again. So it took me about a month to track it all the way through, but I'm going to ask her to hook me up with some engineers who could tell us what the actual technical airflow requirements are. I think that'll be helpful to us. I think, as you know, Exelon at the moment doesn't want to tell us that there are other ways to get information, so.
Was the last update that I saw that they're providing them at the end of the project for the entire community, or did I just make that up?
No,
Somebody had mentioned that.
that's what was said, but I think also the problem is because this has been such a long project, without any updates, people have just sort of been left like, hanging.
To their own devices, yeah.
So,
The things that they're recommending, part of it we improved just by making noise. I think some of you know that I wrote to them in my capacity as a member of the planning commission. And what they were proposing originally was a plastic lattice work to go over all of these things. And all of the conversations that you had with them, notwithstanding, this is where we were. Yeah. So now they're going to make it out of treated wood. So it's still a lattice thing. And you could paint it if you want to. The question is, what if it's picket fence design instead of lattice? Would that make any difference? What are the tearaway requirements? They don't want to give us any information on any of this kind of stuff. The other thing they were proposing is a planter of a certain design to go in front of it. Of course, there are genuine safety issues. If you hide it and you have a problem in your house and the emergency people can't find it, then you have a problem. And so we really do need answers. To the best of my knowledge, they have not provided any examples of these planters, which they promised. P.S. Are the planters made of lead or are they made of plastic?
Well, I think that's also why, again, they do have a certain amount that they're spending, that they can spend on each one of these.
$500 a house.
That buys a lot of concealment.
It
Sure
should.
does.
That's not
Why
right.
don't we
It should
just
buy a
mail
nice-
checks to
yeah,
the homeowners?
That's not
and
the
let them
figure
figure it
that's not the figure that they.
But you can't,
gave.
Kevin, because if you don't have a proper airflow, you can have an explosion. Those things emit gas,
Yeah,
and that's the issue.
It has to be. a
I
certified-
understand those things fully.
We have some.
But the
out there
amount of
right now that
airflow
will
is
explode.
really minimal. Really minimal. And we can get someone who is an expert to tell us how much open space we have to have for ventilation.
I've been trying for 6 months to find one. Do you know anybody? I
Not
swear to God,
free.
I'm asking you for real. I've been talking to Honeywell, I've been talking to all different companies.
I'm reiterating that is one thing, because there's an issue, obviously there's an issue of safety that's always paramount. Then there's the issue of liability. So the only way I could see that mechanism was if they told people, we're giving you a voucher of $500 and you can purchase it from us, because then they own it from beginning to end.
You may be able to say if it sits 6 inches off of the face of the building. That's
Then who's
adequate
gonna go
airspace.
and verify and sign off on that installation?
They'd all have to be signed off on, and you can't have them attached to the building because they have to be able to
No,
be
no, no,
torn
they have to
off.
be freestanding, you just take them away.
Well, then the wind comes and blows them away, a whole bunch of.
No, it has to have enough weight that it doesn't, but
They can also be flipped up, you know, for certain things, so they can have portions. I think
it's like a three-sided box for the most part.
Yeah.
That's some
I-
weight to
I-
hold it in place.
I think I did circulate to you all my presentation where I documented all of them. Go look at it. There's a bunch of explosion risks happening right now on the Strand and Second Street.
I've done high hazard designs for high hazard processes around the world.
Would you like to take this
I
over?
don't want to take it.
Okay, I mean, I'd be happy to have you do it.
No, let's have an open and fair conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to take it on, I have other things to do. But, and I know you do too, I know you do as well. But the point is, the basic physics say you need to have a certain amount of ventilation through. You know the specific gravity of natural gas.
Mhm.
You know what its explosivity limits are in terms of lower limit, higher limit.
Mhm.
You can actually have some concentration that won't explode. Some people use that method.
Mhm.
In this case, you want ventilation.
Mhm.
So it has to generally be open. So you have holes, vents, slats, lattices, just so a certain percentage of the confining space is open
I
to
understand.
ventilation.
Do you think this should be an ordinance that's passed by city council and then enforced by planning?
No, I
Or
think,
by,
I think it should come from the fire guys. I think, they'll get some recommendations that they approve. And, the
They
fire
haven't wanted to
department-
own it so far.
But, I don't think the fire department will have any trouble finding these things. I mean, I'm just a thought, but,
The fire chief is a member of the planning commission.
let him weigh in on it twice. I mean, he's the guy that has to, be convinced. But this isn't like building the Panama Canal. This is, facade. This is something you find at Disney, okay?
Unfortunately, it's an emergency now because we have people who've covered them up. So, what do we do?
I think that if one of the options, if that's even an option to the city chalk, is to set some, because they're doing this in phases. If they could install the covers in phases, so then
They
you have one of
completely
their,
refuse to do that.
yeah, because then that's.
But the reason I bring this up is because just in the meeting that I was part of, I did not feel satisfied with the specific, I had very specific questions about what the concealment methods were, and I had, I had gone back, and you and our former city administrator had met with representatives, and you gave a presentation to the city council. And there seemed to be very specific design elements that you had discussed, and when I brought those, when I was referencing that presentation that you gave based on the discussion that you had, I was told, something to the effect of, well, we wouldn't do that. It's gonna be this generic thing, and it was not.
It's revisiting history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I made this, I said, well, obviously, since you were not there, I could not speak for you, but this is in the record, like they can go back and they can watch the recording. So that's why I think this is something that we should, continue to discuss, because I am a little bit concerned as to what the final product is going to be. I do know that they have a certain amount of money that they can spend on, per house on these concealment methods. And I think that, there should be some dialogue between this commission and, our service provider as to what those things are going to be.
Couldn't agree more.
Let me put this out as just an idea. We have a minimal approved solution. This is from, Fort Dix, it's the Army solution. They all look the same, they're all painted the same color. This will be acceptable. But these are also guidelines. If you can match the guidelines, either by having someone else make it, or you make it, or we take it over
You're so
to Lear
smart.
10.
That's exactly what we asked for.
That's what we want. We want to give
They
people a chance
refused.
to express them.
They refused to
Who
give it to
refused?
us.
Who refused?
Excellent.
Oh, they'll work, they'll come around. They'll come
You think so? We should have you at the next meeting.
around. Go ahead. And pound the table. You pound, you raise your voice, you swear.
I was excluded for the fear I would pound the table, just so you know. I know.
It's a matter of timing, Cynthia. It's a matter of timing.
I've heard it doesn't work very well when you're a woman. but I
No,
won't,
that's
I
true.
won't say more than that because that's not the purpose as to why we're here. With that,
One suggestion, contact the Delaware Association of Professional Engineers.
Can you help us with that?
Find, yeah, I'll do that. I'll give you the
Okay.
contact. In fact, I'll make the contact.
That would be
Let's
great.
find a retired process engineer who has 30 years experience in refineries handling natural gas.
Thank you.
And he can crank some equations. Then he'll blow smoke at Exelon, they'll blow smoke back, they'll sit down, they'll have a drink, it'll get sorted out. And then we'll have some minimum standards, because I personally, it's just one person. I'd like to have as much individual expression. be permitted,
Absolutely.
'cause these are
People have done
people's
some
voices.
really cute solutions.
Wonderful
Whether they
solutions.
need a hole in the top is a whole other question. Some of them
That's a
close the
Jim.
top.
I won't repeat it. My husband is a chemical engineer and had some
Okay,
thoughts,
he'll
but
work for
then,
cheap.
no, then when I said, well, how about, what if
He'll
you
work
were
for
to
She has a
speak
real
up? And
job.
he said, no, thank you. He did not want.
He doesn't want to get all the
that.
questions later.
No, he's like, I'm not interested.
Well, I'm still gonna pursue my constellation contact.
No, I think that's.
Yeah.
Let me ask a general question. Because I don't know the answer to this. This may cost a couple $1,000 to get the guy to sign off on something that he stamps. Where do funds like that come from? Is that available?
I think those are questions for the city.
Cause you'd have to do it under contract, you'd have to have a contract.
Yeah, if
you'd
there's a
have to-
liability issue,
He'd
yeah.
have to double check his, that he has kept all his professional liability
Right.
since he's actively
Exactly.
functioning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So does he have all that insurance?
But what we need really is for Exelon to agree to it and sign off on it. So, but at least a rational conversation.
Or they're just trying to be a pain, I guess.
I would agree.
It's a not very fun saga. So, and I've done an incredible amount of work on it and, you described exactly what we're asking for. So, you're hired. Do you want to do the rules and procedure? Just one sentence on this.
Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, the planning commission suffers from the same things that the HAC suffers from, late submissions, incomplete submissions, submissions we have to look at multiple times, and so forth. And, as with all the other things we've discussed here today, every little commission in every, burg in the whole United States has rules of engagement. And so, Margot Rain came up with the thing that I included, and I'm sorry it's so small. It was a PDF document. I kept asking for the Word and I wasn't allowed to have the Word document. I'm not suggesting you read this exactly for content, but I am suggesting that commissions should operate from similar playbooks and not have individual playbooks per commission. So that's just dumb. That's a challenge and I'm working through that, but I wanted you to be aware because we're talking about this now in planning. And I just talked to Margot yesterday and she's got something that's even better than this. I think in their case, they were concerned about submission dates and completeness and rejections and, iterations, but they were also concerned with attendance, which is a significant problem on planning. And so there's rules here too about when somebody who doesn't attend a certain number of meetings would be asked to resign. The fact of life is, under the municipal code, they can't be removed without a vote of city council, but the commission could recommend to city council to remove the person who doesn't show up, because if we can't get quorums, we can't do our work. And so there's a lot of those kind of factors that are covered here. This is not the best document in the world that was ever done for this, but it covers a lot of the points. And they can be a whole lot longer as well. But I just included it because I'm trying to get these two commissions to use the same playbook. So, to be updated. But do you agree with that as a group? I mean, there may be minor variations, but to the extent
I mean,
possible.
this just kind of memorialized pretty much the way the meetings are sort of run, the
Yeah.
fact
Yeah.
that the roll call and all that.
No,
It doesn't address, it doesn't address
It makes
issues like
sense.
incomplete application, but for the, pretty much that's how you run it.
Yeah.
Except for the note, if there be something, and I don't know if the municipal code, there's something that says that appointed commission member is an absentee member, what they can take the wherewithal, but I mean.
Yeah, the commissioners ourselves cannot vote out a member. We don't have the power to do
No,
that.
that's,
So,
it's,
you can
that has to
recommend.
go before council, yeah.
Kind of defeat the purpose of the commission.
Yeah.
You can-
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, you can get rid of the people you don't like, that'd be fun.
Right.
But, actually, there is some specific, stuff under how new business would be handled. Again, not dissimilar, like, for example, do we require the applicant to be physically present? Right now, there's no rule that says they have to be present.
No, it's
and that's-
recommended, but not
Yeah.
obligation.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But
So-
Cynthia, they don't do well if they're not here, because we have questions and then they can't get answers, so it
That-
gets tabled. I mean,
that may
that's
be
the
true here.
practical
That is
result
not
of
true
that.
in the planning commission. Because all those things are reviewed by the AECom consultant, and if he says, I mean, a lot of very technical stuff that we don't know about, if he says they've checked all the boxes and they're not there, why wouldn't we approve it? And we have approved some under those circumstances. So every commission is different. You could say recommended. I think to require people to be here in person is counterproductive, but, you know,
We do recommend either the homeowner or
or
representative.
representative,
Yeah.
yeah, they're
So
architects.
it's not like
Right.
there's no one here.
Because there are times when it's the representative who can answer the
The
question
attorney
about
or the
materials.
architect.
Most of the time it's the architects
Yeah.
who are in.
The architects must do construction, sometimes have the contractor because he'll explain the detail of what he's wanting to
Right.
do, and so it's the case we say, well, I'll get back to you because the owner's not here, so I have to circle back
Right.
with them.
But the issues are not dissimilar to planning.
Yeah.
So, you don't have to pay too much attention to this because another rev is coming, but, if it's the sense of this group that we should do something similar, if not the same-ish, no, we'll have different due dates than they do, because our meetings happen on a different, sequence, but, in general, it's a good practice that commissions in one place operate in the same way.
I had
You
an
may
issue-
be the best emissary to do that, since you have a foot on each
Yeah.
base, so to speak.
Thank you for the vote of confidence. The reason I'm asking you all for your vote of confidence is that it has not been an easy process so far.
Very different.
So really what we need to do is express to city council that we think commissions should operate similarly and by the same playbook. So,
And is the city attorney at the planning meetings?
yes,
And
usually, not always, usually.
They're generally like larger issues.
Yeah, it's
I think-
zoning and.
Yeah, I
you know,
think
stuff
one
like
time he
that.
came to HAC was when there was all those back and forths about the planning, about the parking and
Oh,
things like that.
right.
Then he
Okay.
was there because there was a lot of back and forth.
Right.
So he
I
was.
mean, I agree with this, and something that I had mentioned to, the new city administrator in my first meeting with her is that it would be nice, for the city to have a handbook for commissions, you know,
Yeah, for the
and.
commissioners, yeah.
Yeah, and for, yeah.
Yeah.
just, I
Well-
mean, essentially detail everything that you have here. and-
For example, this doesn't actually include anything about how meeting minutes are written. You know, one of the things that I've asked for is that the meeting minutes include a table of action items. Because what happens is you get 8 pages of meeting minutes and the action items are buried in it, and then nobody thinks to go back, and it just, you know, people
The
can have a
action
good
items get
idea and then
lost.
it doesn't get actioned, and forever and ever people forget it, then they rediscover it 6 months or a year or 2 years later. It's dumb.
And I think, I mean, we did like have that. I think here is just because HAC typically is voting on motions. So that's why it hasn't, like, the motion passes or not, and the action items are on the applicant. Unless there's a meeting like this where one is saying, okay, X, Y, I'm gonna do some sort of assignment, so I can see where that potentially was not in there, but I mean, that could always be added.
But to that point, I think recording the action items that the petitioner needs to do in the minutes is helpful. because
Well,
then-
they're usually part of the motion, aren't they? Because the motions tend to be very precise, approve unless this X, Y, Z is done, you know, resubmit or communicate. I think that typically winds up there, and it's usually bolded in the motions in the minutes, so you can sort of go and see them.
I mean, it would be easy enough to create a action items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a summary of
at the end,
motions.
A
Yeah.
summary of
And
motion.
then you have a table at the
That's
end.
basically
Yeah.
what that is.
I mean, this is just basic project management. I'm
Yeah.
a former project management professional. I
techniques
think
on.
about stuff like that, so.
I had not realized, I'd forgotten that there was that rule that you can, I remember when I read that earlier today, you cannot consider an agenda item unless has commenced discussion within 2 hours from the start of the meeting. So if the meeting.
Say that
keeps on-
again?
Well, you know, item on page 2, Article 4D, the planning commission will not consider an agenda item unless discussion has commenced on that agenda item within 2 hours from the start of the meeting, excluding adjournment. However, a majority of the planning commission there present may choose to extend the meeting. I just thought it was very, you know, I'm not questioning whether it should or not. I was like, I never thought of that kind of thing. Like, if the meeting keeps on going and you're on the agenda, but you know, we're past 2 hours and we haven't started, then
Let me tell you what the issue
it
is.
is kind of intriguing.
The issue, and this is really about.
Yeah, I'm not
meeting
questioning it, but
control.
just, yeah.
No, I'm gonna tell you why this came up,
So meetings don't
because
start
certain
going.
petitioners who come before planning. Bring their entire fleet of consultants and they talk for an hour and a half, and it takes up the whole meeting. So, that is a meeting management issue, which is a matter for the chair. So probably what should be in here is that the chair will manage presentations, or presentations will be limited to 30 minutes or 40
Yeah, I was gonna say,
minutes.
because are they not giving, like, normally in other forums that I've been to, you come and you're told, okay, no more than 30 minutes.
Exactly.
Or no more than
Right.
45 minutes,
You're
because
given
you
the
can't
time.
summarize that. The goal here is not to do a whole blown, it's
Right.
what are the
Um,
salient
right.
issues we have to decide
Trust
on.
me, it's been a problem.
Mm,
And
For the
again,
planning commission.
in the planning commission, and so this was an effort to address that. And when we read this draft, we all kind of laughed, because it's
for-
already been read by the planning commission.
It's also putting the onus on the poor person who's after the 2 hours, like if the first applicant, I mean, when I first read it,
Right,
I was
it's
like, if the
unfair.
first applicant is gone, you're like, you know, I can see them looking at the clock, like, oh my gosh, it's 1:59. Does this mean I'm coming back? Unless everybody's.
Well, 1 month later, more to the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, exactly. that's
Which
what I
is
meant.
completely
Yeah.
unacceptable. So I think this will end up struck, which is why I said, don't pay too close attention, but
Right.
it's funny you picked that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
because
was, you know,
it's-
you.
Yeah,
It's a good framework, though.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
That-
And we
that-
basically do follow most of it.
Mhm.
yeah.
So I certainly can't. We can talk about it and
Let me
refashion
get
it.
the
for our-
next draft before you.
Yeah,
do
but I
anything.
think, yeah, that was, as I said, that wasn't a reflection on the value of it, so I was just intrigued by that particular one, that had this vision of
What-
this person
what-
saying, shoot, you know, my
That was,
time,
yeah.
why, you know.
People were aggravated because they couldn't get to Zolli's in time for the whatever.
Well, I think we've all been, at least, you know, when you go and you're presenting at a conference and then you're the last of a panel of 3 speakers and everybody goes over.
Oh,
and
it's
you- And your
totally
20
long.
minute slot winds up being 5,
Yeah.
so it's kind of. I do want to bring one thing up, just on these 2 things, because I think this has been productive. At some point, perhaps in the next few months, I would like us to have similar working sessions about the applications of the guidelines, how the tier 1 and tier 2, you know, we had talked about the tier 1 and tier 2. Because there's certain things where we're very specific in the guidelines when they were done all those years ago about what goes to tier 1 versus not. And then some things when they completely match, even though they normally should be, to hack because it's clear, but it's not material, even if it's acceptable. So I'd like to have this conversation about how that's been working. I typically do like a return where I go and I say, okay, in this past year, in the past 2 years, this has been the applications, this has been the tier 1s, this has been the tier 2s, how many have been. And so we can dig in and see. I think it's just to get a feedback. Is there anything that's worked well? Is there anything that we think needs to be adjusted? That could be a recommendation. It doesn't have to be a full blown. It can be a small addendum. It could be something as simple as talking to the city executive, like, can we put this? It has to go to city council because it's.
Yeah.
a hearing.
Right. Yeah,
But I think if everybody thinks
oh, definitely.
it would be an
Yeah.
opportunity
would be
just
a
to get
good
a
idea.
feedback
Yeah,
and look
definitely.
back and then sort of see what.
Could you put together even like a recommendation, because you're on the front line of the tier 1s, and then we could discuss it. in the
Yeah, I
form
mean,
of a
I can definitely write a
recommendation.
small memo and distribute it, so you can have things that have, and where things have been, you know, operating, where it's been like, we definitely followed the spirit, but to expedite things, you know, it started out with very tight rein. And I think as the process was moving and we're comfortable seeing some of these things, but like there are also things like it was approved at tier 1 and the percent I'm using the right materials, I'm using, you know, 2 divided lines, and suddenly it's coming back, well, you know, we're using wood, but can it become simulated divided, things like that. So I
Yeah.
think there are nuances, and it'd be good that all the members of the commission are on board, so that would take them up.
I think that's sort of something we discussed at the beginning of the
Mhm.
meeting, is just identifying, you know, that those kind of changes with you know, the incomplete applications or people slip things in at the end and then I mean, we can discuss that more in this meeting, but just making sure that we have all the materials, it's all complete. So we can actually do our due diligence and having enough
Yeah.
time to actually review this.
And I think the tier ones have been complicated,
Yeah.
more recently, and it might be that there's been a bigger turnover of properties in the historic area.
Well,
too.
in the last, I called her, what was it, yesterday or Friday, I just said, hey, because in the inbox, 12 applications dropped the same day within the space of like 2 hours. There was just a lot of things coming in. I mean, it doesn't mean, it's not woe is me. These we track them, we process them, they get into Excel tables, they get through, but there's suddenly like, there's just been a lot going on and a lot of work happening. And some of them are straightforward, not all are flagged urgent, you know, or critical. But we are starting, we're moving by next month. There's somebody within Tetra Tech where we're gonna deal with these, just like we deal with construction administration services, you know, things that come in are reviewed, critical or not, and then I literally have a tracker that gets flagged, it's been X number of days, so we can make sure that we turn them around. But yeah.
This might be post-COVID too, you know, that people, because the construction costs have come down very substantially, so it might be just that people are finally getting the demand
Trying
is
to do
loosening
things,
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just coincidence,
Mhm.
a whole bunch coming together at a certain point. And
I don't have anything coming before you, I just. So happy to say.
That is not a problem. Let me get through.
Is there anything from
All good, very good discussion.
any public comment?
Yep. Phil Gross, 1301 13th Street. First, I'd like to thank the commission for your diligence with all the details you're dealing with. First, the meeting started, got to be more friendly, open, inviting, and manageable with the residents. But then there's some tough words that I think as a collective body, you should not only review what the documents are, but the wording. Layla, I think you've always done a great job, and I think part of what you guys are doing, kind of revamping, I think Layla should be brought back as a voting member of the commission. That was a horrendous decision that they made to exclude her from that. But I think it'll be beneficial to everyone here that she be given that right to vote. After you guys make a decision, who and where is the follow-up to those mandates or decisions? Whose lap does it fall into, and how does this commission know or not know if your recommendations are being followed?
So we don't have any enforcement power. It's the building official is who goes and inspects the work and makes sure that the work, the materials, you know, everything that was approved here has been done, you know, in accordance with what was approved, that the end result, you know, is in compliance with the regulations and what we approved, the scope of work that was approved.
For the commission, not the bus.
Ah, good wording. Next is who was discussing the evolution of the I guess procedures and the drafting of a welcome letter? Was that you, Miss Hayward, and Miss Fatty?
That was something that we had discussed that in a meeting, and then we voted to have this working session.
So there was no discussion outside of a meeting between you two?
Oh,
No.
Okay, I'm just asking.
However, I do want to point out, two commissioners are allowed to speak to each other.
Uh,
That's legal.
Okay.
You have 10 seconds.
You're awfully defensive, aren't we? I'm done.
Yeah, that's good.
With that, I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
Thank you, guys. Good meeting.
Always
Get
a
together
pleasure.
again soon.
Yeah.
To do the more fun.
Yeah, I've